Since the movie was very cliche, there are thoughts about one idea short of being an excellent teenage romance. As it stands, it's a pleasing but cliche routine as the senior class power couple named Zack and Taylor, the last remaining love match for freshman years, are on the outs. They were the it couple that everyone thought would stay together forever, but not so. For during spring break, the social climbing Taylor dumped Zack for a new guy named Brock Hudson, a self-absorbed celebrity from the real world. She's all that is a delightful and thoughtful romantic movie between the hunk and the dweeb. Zack is the popular guy at school, and Cook is the no-name art student who shuts everyone out. After Zuck is dumped by his popular girlfriend, he makes a bet with his friends to turn the nice girl that he goes out into the prom queen. However, as he gets to know his target, he begins to have true feelings for her. But the fact that it started out as a bet complicates things. Since our brain is made up of millions of neurons that gives electrical and chemical signals, it manages to produce synapses. Zack's nervous system consists or caused his neurotransmitter responsible for his reaction causing synaptic potentials, as his dopamine and serotonin were increased due to his desire to pursue and obtain machismo by making the weirdest girl in school a prom queen. His excitement produces signals that causes multiple synapses. His response to achieving his plan was driven off after, because at the end he was flooded with sensations that originates in the primitive parts of the brain, the emotional core of the human nervous system, that evolved long before the cerebral cortex. Since the neurons are the information messengers, his thoughts travel all around the different areas of the brain and the rest of his nervous systems.
Zack is the big man on campus at his Southern California high school. After returning from spring break, he finds out his girlfriend Taylor has cheated on him with a reality TV star, Brock. After Zack and Taylor's breakup, Zack consoles himself by claiming that Taylor is replaceable with any girl in the school. Zack's friend Dean disagrees and bets Zack to turn any random girl from school into a prom queen in 6 weeks. Zack accepts. Dean chooses Lenny Bugs, an awkward and unpopular art student. The connection of this movie to our previous lesson is that our brain communicate with each other through action potential and synapses. For example, when Zack and Lainey first met, there is this connection between them, but as they get to know each other better, their interaction became more frequent and their emotional connection grows stronger. This is similar to how neurons that are not initially connected can form new synapses and strengthen their communication pathway with repeated activity. Furthermore, just as synapses can be strengthened or weakened depending on the frequency of their activation, the characters in the movie experience changes in their relationship based on the frequency and intensity of their interactions. Ultimately, the way the characters communicate with each other shapes their emotional connections and drives the plot forward, much like how action potentials and synapses shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in real life.
The movie titled She's All That is a delightful and thoughtful romantic comedy between the hunk and the dweeb. It's your typical teen romance comedy fiction about a high school popular jock named Zack Tyler who makes a bet that he can turn an unpopular and plain girl into the school's prom queen who is named Lainey Bugs. Because of the bet Zack proposed, it turns into a mess that ends up with them both falling in love with each other. The plot of the movie shows how hormones extremely affect the adolescent years of our life. The characters are in their crucial stages of life, the adolescence, which is the phase of life between childhood and adulthood. The stages of life are where the hormones play primarily, the most being at the peak of activeness. There's also a thing called raging teenage hormones, which Lainey's father mentioned in the movie. Given the reason why the emotions and behavior of a teenager are vigorous, messy, and sometimes complicated. Just before puberty, children undergo a wave of synaptogenesis, a rapid formation of new synapses or neural connections in the brain. By puberty, the density of dendritic spines, small knobs which receive signals from axons in the prefrontal cortex, is 2 or to 3 times greater compared to that of adults. Synapses in the adolescent brain are notably more dynamic than they are in adulthood. In the movie, peer pressure is prevalent, like what Zack experienced. Fitting in a group for a sense of being seen and belonging to a society is a part of our development and building our confidence. Just like when Zack said Lainey's eyes were beautiful, especially after Lainey's transformation, making her prim and more beautiful that made Zack become deeply into her. In conclusion, it explains that us humans are naturally and biologically attracted to phenotypically beautiful things and appearance, how it plays a vital role in our lives no matter what circumstances under it. Researchers discovered that adolescence is a period of prefrontal cortex remodeling, a brain structure dedicated to higher functions such as planning and social behavior. Images of the brain in action show that adolescents' brains work differently than adults' brains when making decisions or solving problems. Their actions are guided more by the emotional and reactive amygdala and less by the thoughtful, logical frontal cortex.
Let's talk briefly about the romantic comedy film She's All That, which was released in 1999 and directed by Robert Escoe. To begin with, Zack Snyder is the most well-known student at his Southern California high school. However, there is a girl named Lainey Boggs who is not popular and is an awkward art student. Then, when Zack found out that his girlfriend Taylor Vaughn had cheated on him, he comforted himself by thinking that Taylor could be replaced by any other girl on the campus. His friend Dean doubts and bets that Zack can turn any random lady from the campus into the prom queen in 6 weeks. Zack agrees with it, and Dean chooses Lainey Boggs. What is likely to happen is that Zack attempts to befriend Lainey, but she politely declines his advances until he requests her assistance with art. Lainey invites Zack to perform on stage, and he improvises a routine with his happy Zack, but she rejects him when he attempts to charm her again. Now let's look at the situation in which Lainey agrees to accompany Zack and his friends to the beach, and they subsequently ask her to a party. Therefore, Taylor humiliates Lainey and brings her to tears at the party. Dean asks Lainey to be his prom date after a disagreement with Zack. As Zack confronts him, Dean reveals the bet, forcing Zack to make a public confession. And now let's turn to Zack, who takes his sister to the prom with Dean because he is unable to reconcile with Lainey. Dean plans to seduce Lainey, but her friend Jessie overhears and warns Zack. He rushes after Lainey, who has already left with Dean, but Lainey avoids his advances. Zack confesses his true feelings to Lainey, and they dance and kiss by the pool. On graduation day, Zack appears nude to applause from the crowd and smiles from Lainey. I can relate to the part when Lainey stumbles while walking the stairs and catches the attention of Dean. So he chooses her for Zack as a prom queen. So it is related to our topic, which is all about action potential synapses. And I highlight and relate it to the acetylcholine because in the brain, acetylcholine functions as a neurotransmitter and as a neuromodulator. The brain contains a number of cholinergic areas, each with distinct functions, such as playing an important role in arousal, attention, memory, and motivation. Especially when Lainey caught the attention of Dean, that is why I relate it to the acetylcholine. Parts of the body that use or are affected by acetylcholine are referred to as cholinergic. Cholinergic agents are compounds that mimic the action of acetylcholine. Then also, I connected the part when Zack performs at the theater for Lainey, which makes him glad because he did Lainey's request. They walk outside, stop for a minute, and then Zack took off her eyeglasses and told her that her eyes were beautiful. But Lainey rejected it. And also, I linked the part when Zack tries to kiss Lainey but she cracks a joke, making Zack embarrass himself. So the last part that I associated with is when Zack confesses his feelings towards Lainey and they dance and kiss by the pool. So why did I relate the parts to our topic? Because it is related to dopamine. It is a neurotransmitter made in your brain. It plays a role as a reward center and in many body functions, including memory, movement, motivation, mood, attention, and more. Dopamine is known as the feel-good hormone. It gives you a sense of pleasure. It also gives you the motivation to do something when you're feeling pleasure. In conclusion, my video essay discusses a brief explanation of the romantic comedy film, She's All That, when there's a popular boy student who agrees to the bet of his friend. But luckily, he falls in love with that girl who is not well known and an awkward art student. In the second part of my video essay, I talk about the parts that I connected to our topic, like the acetylcholine, cholinergic receptors, and dopamine.
She's All That is based on the story of high school seniors and young adolescents just trying to make it through the end of year's festivities. These young athletic high school seniors make a bet amongst their friend group that the recently dumped heartthrob Zack Seiler cannot only get any girl but turn into her prom queen. They refer to this as their project and shopping. To relate this on our topic last time, their sights set on the quiet, art-obsessed Lainey Boggs, who doesn't at all fit their popular friend group standards. Neurotransmitters interact with target sites called receptors, located throughout the brain and body regulate a wide variety of processes including emotions, fear, pleasure, joy, anger, mood, memory, cognition, attention, concentration, alertness, energy, appetite, cravings, sleep, and the perception of pain. Meanwhile, Lainey, different from other female leading roles, is strong-willed and hard-headed. At the beginning of the story, she doesn't want anything to do with the senior class president, but as expected, she soon gives on and grows fond of John. It has been focus of reverse gender norms and sexist portrayal. Taylor is easily swayed by money, power, and attention from men. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers in the nervous system. They influence mood, muscle movement, heart rate, and many other functions. Neurotransmitters are substances which neurons use to communicate with another and with their target issues in the process of synaptic transmission or the neurotransmission. Neurotransmitters are synthesized in and released from nerve endings into the synaptic cleft. From there, neurotransmitters bind to receptors, proteins in the cellular membrane of the target tissues. The target tissues get excited, inhibited, or functionally modified in some other way. All throughout the movie, we see the men compete to make Lainey this from prom queen. However, what we don't see is them being considerate of her feelings. Lainey is seen as an object through this movie, much like many women treated in the real world. She's All That is a perfect representation of how men view women as things that there are for their disposal instead of human beings. This directly relates to the fact that these women's feelings are completely overlooked when the men set out to achieve their goal. This movie analyzes how the social cognitive theory in She's All That is summed up with how strong teenagers' influence can be. it also analyzes how Lainey Brooks dealt with many issues in the movie. Her mother died when she was young, which turned her into an outsider who used art to cope with her emotions. Lastly, it also analyzed how stereotypical teenagers or the teenage traits and roles are seen repeatedly in the film.
A romantic comedy called She's All That was released in 1999. The film centers on athlete Zach Seiler in high school, who takes up his friend's wager to make nerdy, outcast art student Lainey Boggs the prom queen. As Zach spends more time with Lainey, he starts to fall in love with her, and she starts to change into a more self assured and fashionable individual. But when Lainey learns about the wager, their relationship is put in jeopardy. Finally, Zack comes to terms with his true love for Lainey and makes an effort to win her back. Peer pressure, self esteem, and the transforming power of love are among the issues that the film explores. The movie's main character, Zack, wagers that he can make Lainey, an ugly and unpopular girl, the prom queen. To do this, he starts to hang out with Lainey, gets to know her, and gives her the confidence and acceptance she needs. After some time, Lainey changes and emerges as the prom queen. Similar to this, during neurotransmission, the presynaptic neuron transmits a signal to the postsynaptic neuron, which, depending on the kind of neurotransmitter and receptor involved, can either excite or inhibit the postsynaptic neuron. From the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, the neurotransmitter serves as the messenger. The presynaptic neuron is like Zack in this comparison, who delivers a signal to the postsynaptic neuron, a Lainey-like cell type. The neurotransmitter is comparable to Lainey's transformation, which modifies the postsynaptic neuron's behavior. The neurotransmitter helps to alter the electrical potential of the postsynaptic neuron, making it more or less likely to fire an action potential. Just as Zack helps Lainey become more self-assured and socially acceptable. In conclusion, the plot of She's All That can be compared to the neurotransmission process in the brain by comparing the presynaptic neuron, postsynaptic neuron, and neurotransmitter to Zack, Lainey, and the metamorphosis that Lainey goes through.
She's All That is a romantic comedy movie that tells the story of a romance that started from the bet between Zack Seiler, played by Freddie James Prinze Jr., and Dean Sampson Jr., played by Paul Walker. This bet was made as a result of Zack Seiler's girlfriend Taylor Vaughn's affair with Brock, a reality TV personality. With bruised ego, Zack tries to console himself and claims that Taylor is replaceable and that he can turn any girl to a prom queen, to which Dean disagrees with, and then and there their bet begins. Dean chooses Lainey Boggs, who is played by Rachel Leigh Cook, to be the girl who Zack will turn into a prom queen within 6 weeks. And then the slow burn of a romance started with Zack and Lainey that are met with few conflicts in the process. Meanwhile, to relate this movie to the last discussion in biopsychology, I will take the scene of Zack's impromptu performance in the small theater to relate it with the discussion. In this particular scene of the movie, Zack was asked to perform on the stage without prior heads up or warning, so he does an act that he is familiar with, which is soccer. To correlate this, I will try to explain the neuroactivity or neuron transmission when Zack was performing his act. since the discussion in biopsychology is about the neurons and neurotransmitters. When Zack is performing his impromptu act in front of a small audience, he was feeling nervous and was having a self-talk while also focusing on his play. In his act, Zack was passing the ball from his left foot to another and playing tricks like what is usually seen with a soccer player. With this, I can relate the neuron activities that is tackled in the last discussion. Neurons are the fundamental units in sending and receiving signals which allow a person to move their muscles, feel the external world, form memories, think, and more. So when Zack was performing his act, his neurons are already receiving information from the external world through sensory neurons, which is happening when he was seeing the ball being passed from his one foot to another. And this information or signal will be sent to his central nervous system, which the motor neuron will receive from the central nervous system to carry out the motor impulse to specific effectors, which happens when he was passing the ball from his one foot to the other without a miss. Meanwhile, to relate neurotransmitter to the scene, since neurotransmitters are the chemical messenger, it is to keep in mind that while Zack was performing his act and the neurons are passing information from one another to coordinate with proper motor movement, his neurotransmitters are also working alongside with it, since neurotransmitters are the chemicals used by neurons to talk to each other. So when a neuron was sending signal from the other neuron or cell, it was neurotransmitters that are being secreted to affect the other neuron, which is a synapse. And then the process will go on that a neurotransmitters will be released from the synaptic vesicles into a synaptic cleft, where they will interact with neurotransmitters receptors on the target cell, and then the neurotransmitter's effect on the target cell is determined by the receptor it binds. To give a more specific neurotransmitters example and explanation, I will again use the scene of Zack impromptu performance. When Zack was asked to perform on stage, it was evident that he was nervous. So, a neurotransmitter GABA can be the explanation why Zack had managed to perform and regulate his activity while performing. He was able to suppress his nervousness and was able to concentrate on his performance. But then again, it is not only the GABA that is an active neurotransmitter when Zack performed, as there are actually more. Epinephrine, which is a neurotransmitter that plays a role in the body's fight or flight response. In Zack's case, since he was asked so suddenly to perform, it is understandable that he experiences stress or nervousness, so when the epinephrine got activated, it resulted to a sudden jolt of energy which is evident to his performance. It helped him in making quick decisions to what he should perform, to which resulted of him performing something that he is familiar with, which is soccer. Additionally, there are more neurotransmitters to be mentioned with this example, like the sudden surge of dopamine that Zack exhibits when he was with Lani after performing, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, and glutamate, and maybe more that I am not aware of, since neurotransmitters are essential to the function of complex neural systems.
A story in which unprecedented love occurs. This is the movie's all about. But little did we know that it may also portray psychological problem of the characters, one of which is the most obvious one, the character named Brooke. Brooke is in the movie as a famous person in a long comedy gag show. He eventually had an active role in the movie, as Taylor, Zack's girlfriend, decided to break up with Zack to go with him. Eventually, the main reason why the movie started like that. This character portrays a hyperactive socialite with problems regarding societal interactions, showing a unique and weird personality to everyone. So, how does Brock became candidate of a psychological disorder? In continuation on what I told earlier, he also tends to have an aggressive demeanor and trivial manners, shown in the part in which he yelled to the other members of the gag show, and combined with his disoriented thought patterns, along with his hyperactivity and repetitive behaviors, can be concluded of him having an ACD, or Autism Spectrum Disorder. Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, is a developmental disability caused by differences in the brain, specifically the regions in cerebellum. It generally resulted from a defective gene of an individual, specifically the formation of neurons that lack the RNF8 protein. This resulted to form about 50% more synapses than those with the healthy people. It may sound advantages on their part, but it's really not. Because an increased number of synapses in the brain creates miscommunication among neurons in the developing brain that correlates with impairments in learning. According to Acid Bonney, the head of the Department of Neuroscience at Washington University School of Medicine, it also affects the action potential of the brain negatively, in which it may disrupt the travel of neurotransmitters in the brain. Ideally, having more dendrites in the brain would show an increased speed of oriented thought processes, which generally affecting the learning ability of an individual. This can also be shown as Zack, the main protagonist of the movie, creatively imagining the story of Taylor about Brock in the first part of the movie that requires him to have multiple dendrite trees in the brain. So, dendrite trees is basically dendrites with tons of branching ends. Having dendrite trees in the brain would result in increased speed of neurotransmitters to be transmitted of the neuron in the action potential process, resulted from the shortcut made by the branches which sped up the transmission of neuron to neuron. Furthermore, Brock's autism may also resulted from astrocyte abnormalities, as damaged astrocyte can trigger the release of glutamate. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter that kills neurons. Excitatory neurotransmitters excite the neuron and cause it to fire the message, meaning the message continues to be passed along to the next cell, making the released glutamate be responsible of him being hyper. The combination of him having more synapses plus the active release or pass of the message of the neurons resulted him to have a disoriented thinking patterns, but not severe enough to be psychologically evaluated as crazy, but only encompasses the range on which he can be called as an individual with autism. To make it short, Brock's autism may be resulting from synaptic dysfunction and glutamate exclusion. There's also other characters that may have psychological disorder, but evidences are too vague to prove them so, such as Lainey having depression because of the death of her mother, or even Zack having bipolar disorder because of his impulsivity and impaired decision making, shown in the part where his father and him having quarrel regarding his future. Other than those three characters, I don't seem to find any characters with psychological disorder. So, to link the movie to our previous lesson about synapses and action potential, like I discussed earlier, that Brock's autism is maybe resulting from synaptic dysfunction and glutamate execution, and also the use of various neurotransmitters, categorizing from excitatory to inhibitory such as dopamine and serotonin, which is used to modify our moods and behaviors through modifying the action potential process of the neuron. It's basically unnecessary to further discuss this, as it is natural to have these kinds of neurotransmitters, and only imbalances from it could lead to disorders. Furthermore, like I said earlier, there's only a few evidence that could prove the other character's psychological disorder. And also, given that I'm still a student and lack of credentials to further prove my viewpoint, then needless to say that these are my assumptions of whether the characters of the movie having a psychological disorder. Like I said, further research and documentation is needed to answer why she's like that.
Ang mga prosesong pangaksyon at synapses ay mga mahalagang bahagi ng nervous system na nagpapahintulot ng pagpapasa ng mga senyales sa pagitan ng mga neurons. Ang mga prosesong ito ay kritikal na papel sa kung paano natin nalalaman, nagpapaproseso at tumutugon sa impormasyong mula sa mundo sa paligid natin. Sa pelikulang She's All That, maaaring makita kung paano ang mga pangaksyon at synapses ay may kaugnayan sa pag-unlad ng mga karakter at kanilang mga relasyon. Ang isang pangaksyon ay isang maikling electrical impulse na naglalakbay sa buong axon ng isang neuron na nagpapahintulot ng komunikasyon sa pagitan ng mga neurons. Ang electrical signal na ito ay ginagawa kapag ang memory potential ng neuron ay umaabot sa isang tiyak na threshold na naging sanhi ng mabilis na depolarization at pagbukas ng mga voltage gate ion channels. Ito ay nagpapahintulot ng mga positively charged ions na pumasok sa cells na lalo pang magde-depolarize ang cell at lumilikha ng isang positive feedback loop na nagreresulta sa pang-aksyon. Kapag ang isang aksyon ay nakarating sa dulo ng akson, ito ay nagpapahiwatig ng pagpapalabas ng mga neurotransmitter mula sa vesicle sa synaptic cleft na ang buwang sa pagitan ng axis terminal at mga dendrites na sumusunod sa neuron. Ang mga neurotransmitters na ito ay kumakapit sa mga receptor sa postsynaptic neuron na nagpapabukas o nagsasara ng ion channels at lumilikha ng isang pagbabago sa membrane potential ng neuron, and pagbabagong ito sa membrane potential ay maaring maging nakakapagpalakas o nakakapagpahina. At kung ang kabuuang epekto ay nakakapagpalakas, ito ay maaaring magdulot ng pang-aksyon ng isa pang aksyon sa postsynaptic neuron. So she saw that makikita natin kung paano ang mga prosesong ito ay may kaugnayan sa pag-unlad ng mga karakter at sa kanilang mga relasyon. Halimbawa, kapag nakita ni Zack ang unang beses si Lainey, ang kanyang utak ay nagpoproseso ng visual information at naglilikha ng pang-aksyon na naglalakbay sa kanyang mga neurons at nagpapahiwatig ng pagpapalabas ng neurotransmitters. Ang mga neurotransmitters na ito ay kumakapit sa mga receptors sa kanyang utak na nagpapalabas ng dopamine at iba pang neurotransmitters na maaaring magdulot ng mga pakiramdam ng kasiyahan at pagkakumaling. Gayun din, kapag nakilala ni Lainey si Zack, pinoproseso ng kanyang utak ang panlipunang impormasyon at bumubuo ng isang potensyal na aksyon na nagtitrigger, nagpapalabas ng mga neurotransmitter na nagbubuklod sa mga receptor sa kanyang utak. Maaari itong humantong sa pagbuo ng mga alaala at pagpapalakas ng mga synapses na maaari makaapekto sa kanyang pag-uugali at emosyon sa hinaharap.
The movie She's All That is about Zack Sailor, who was popular in their campus. One day, his girlfriend Taylor broke up with him because she found another man who was better than Zack, which is Brooke Hudson, a television star. After that, Zack is afraid that he will lose his popularity in the campus, and 6 months from now, they will have a prom. So, Zack was afraid that he will lose his popularity or reputation, so he need to find partner. So Dean makes a bet with him where he choose any girl on the campus that Zack will partner with, and Zack will make that girl to be a prom queen. So Zack agree with Dean, which is Dean choose Lainey Boggs, who's not popular and an awkward art student. Zack attempts to have a conversation with Lainey, but he is ignored by Lainey. Zack try to talk about art to Lainey that help him to have a first conversation with her. That starts of their relationship with each other to grow. They become more open and understanding to each other's situation that makes them more close. Zack helps Lainey to have more confidence in herself and helps her to socialize with other people that help her to enjoy her life. But one day, Zack invites Lainey to attend a party. Lainey was humiliated by Taylor. That makes her want to cry and run from the party, but Zack follows her and helps her, which make their relationship to go deeper. After that event, someone vote her to be next prom queen. That helped her to fight with Taylor for the position of being prom queen. But she found out that she was a bet from Dean and Zack about being a prom queen. That's make him mad at Zack. So Dean take advantage in that situation so he could flirt with Lainey. On the day of the prom, Zach was partnered by Taylor because he was forced and he doesn't have any choice. So he chose Taylor to be his partner. While Lainey was partnered by Dean because he was not able to reconcile with Lainey after what happened. Lainey's friend Jessie found out that Dean tried to take advantage of what happened and tried to seduce her to take Lainey first time. So when Jesse found about that, he tried to warn Zach. So Zach rushed to save Lainey from Dean that he does not find her. And after Lainey got home, she found out that Zach was waiting for her and found out the truth about Zach really feel about her. And Lainey tells what happened to Dean when he tried to seduce her that makes the two be on good terms. The action potential and synapses in the movie was when Lainey's mom died from her illness that made her depressed, that caused her to have trust issues and hard time in socializing with other people. While Zach was pursuing Lainey to be his partner to prom because if Lainey win as a prom queen, his popularity will rise again, and when he was doing his best to his education because he feel that his father pushing him to be like him when he was young and who was good at everything and want him to follow his father's steps. And lastly, from Brock, where he has autism, which he acts whenever he wants and doesn't care what people think about him that caused him break up with Taylor. By watching She's All That, you will find a lot of action potential and synapses. You will gain insights and understanding the different situation of a teenager facing in their life.